I was a massive fan of Horizon Zero Dawn when that game first released back in 2017. Wait a minute, was it 2017? Ha! It was. Just like all the other pointless moments in my life where I actually get something right, no one cares. But back at that time, during that game's release, I was a very simple man with a very simple taste. I just wanted to be able to ride a giant mechanical woolly mammoth that bellowed fire straight out of its mouth and ass, while I laughed maniacally stomping through a tribe of natives that was so technologically inferior I was their literal god. Unfortunately, you couldn't do that in the game, so my murderous fantasy was practically like my social life, all in my head. So while I settled for the gentle, sweet voices of my teddy bears, I also had to settle for getting my ass stomped out by a giant mechanical T-Rex. And while it was a little bit disheartening to see myself dodging giant feet, barely clinging on to life, not seeing natives do it under my oppressive reign, I still loved what I was experiencing. Needless to say, I was also extremely impressed with what Guerrilla Games managed to actually pull off. To go from a linear FPS series like Killzone to then completely break into a much more ambitious and frankly completely foreign genre of video games. I mean, seriously, if you've never seen the documentary on this game's development from NoClip, go watch it. Guerrilla Games had to do a lot of homework leading to even getting the basic world design concept for this game down. And to do all that while pulling it off with the level of success that they were able to, just goes to show that with enough passion and dedication, damn near anything was possible. Bonus points for having a fuck ton of money behind you in the form of support from Sony to achieve those dreams. I mean, granted, it wasn't perfect. Facial animations were as expressive as a mime fighting off an orgasm, while their body movement was as stiff as a bunch of 12-year-olds trying to hide the fact they're stoned out of their minds. But you could argue that just added to the relatability of the game. Fast forward 5 years and we got probably one of the greatest sequels ever made. Weirdly, I do want to admit something here, and that's, as much as I love both games, the initial trailers, information, and usual hype people would find themselves sucked into just wasn't there for me. I don't know why, but even when Zero Dawn showed how competent Guerrilla Games was at making a brand new and completely unique IP, even with the sequel proving to expand on the already solid foundation, I think I've just been catfished by the industry too many times to properly get excited by a trailer. But enough about my confessions of an overaged teenage gamer. I gotta say that Forbidden West delivered for me, and it delivered pretty damn strongly with, at the very least, the story. Honestly, the improved facial animations and just overall look at the people in this world this time around definitely helped out tremendously with actually helping me take the story, world, and lore much more seriously. You know, I actually found myself caring about the tribes, the side quests, and how many tribes of the Tanakh had their own personal politics and issues not only with one another but internally within themselves.
You hid what happened to the wound. How can we believe you now?
Draka.
No, you know what? Enough of this! No more words! Consider that a challenge.
Gather your squads then, and meet us at the Gate of the Vanquished.
It also impressed me that the side quests had full-blown cutscenes rendered. I don't know, it just was an added benefit that I don't think Guerrilla Games really had to add, yet they did it anyways, and I appreciate them all the more for the extra effort. Now, I've played Horizon Forbidden West well over 40 hours across its many different difficulty levels, and aside from the improvements they made from the focus and how it has a very special place in combat now, allowing you to see an enemy's weaknesses and giving you the ability to full-on highlight a specific weakness of said enemy, allowing for the player to pinpoint a particular weak spot in the middle of combat for scavenging purposes or straight up eliminating that enemy as quickly as possible, especially when we're talking specifically about the animals, the robots, whatever you want to call it. The fact that you can highlight a specific part and it tells you what that part can be utilized for, the fact that they streamlined all of that, I think is phenomenal. I think this game was a massive success, and not just because it's a Sony exclusive. Ha, bad joke, I know, but this game was pretty much a 180 for me. With the first game, I followed the story, learned the world, and closely watched Aloy's personal journey to discover who her mother was. But it was all secondary to the combat and world exploration, two things I could not get enough of. I was addicted to taking down Thunderjaws and Ravagers. I actually was so wrapped up in hunting down machines that I really didn't do any story missions. For the first couple days the game was actually out, I was actively hunting down machines. I had a full-blown TV series in my head about being the only person in the world keeping the machine population under control. It was fucking sad, I know. I mean, sure, it also got a little tedious and as exciting as a loveless 10-year-old marriage, but it's what kept me entertained. With Forbidden West, the combat is still great. It's more of the same, obviously, with more machines set down, a bigger variety of enemies, a bigger variety of weapons, and a bigger variety of elements you can use against said enemies. I would even say thanks to the added depth of upgrading your weapons and outfits, as well as the many different skill trees plus valor power surges, passive boosts, based off your intention to scavenge a specific part for an upgrade, or if you're just putting a machine down out of a secret bloodlust. There's a level of skill here that you can't really take your time to properly cultivate, or even before taking down any bigger prey, you can set up traps and properly plan ahead on what your execution method is going to be. From planting traps to outright making machines fight each other in the later game. There's a level of skill in this game's combat that can be quite impressive, especially if you're playing on the harder difficulties. Then you really got to focus on each machine's weakness and how to capitalize on those. So I don't mean to diminish the combat in any way. I was simply saying that I'm in awe with how Guerrilla Games managed to handle the many different aspects of this game's main story. It's a sequel that picks up 6 months or practically directly after its predecessor story ends. So you hear rumors of the Shadow Karja, the cults from the previous game. Then you got to deal with Silence, the anti-hero from the first game, who you don't know what his real intentions are. Aloy's in the middle of both saving the world while also trying to live up to her peer who she's cloned off of. And you still see her yearning for her original self to accept her as her own daughter. Then you're dealing with the savage tribe known as the Tanakh, who's inconveniently in the middle of a civil war, with the rebels learning how to ride machines, something they learned from Silence, who's planning to use them as an army to fight off people that had left Earth centuries ago and somehow managed to practically become immortal. All this while Aloy's finding the programs and pieces needed to rebuild something to save the world from collapsing. The sheer extent Guerrilla Games went into in order to properly flesh out the world of this game and its many inhabitants was incredible. To be honest, I'm still a little torn on their decision to incorporate Far Zenith and the fact that they're immortal human beings living in space trying to escape the righteous vengeance of a giant collective consciousness that broke free.
Nemesis, what is it?
It is us. The minds of Far Zenith. Or failed copies of them, anyway. Back on Sirius, some of my peers weren't satisfied with physical immortality. They wanted digital transcendence.
It seems like one of the writers just got high off shrooms and just let their imagination completely run wild. I feel as if them doing that, they kind of backed themselves into a really weird corner when it comes to writing. I mean, it's going to be interesting how they get out of that weird corner they backed themselves into with the third game, if there even is a third game, but it just seems like the story was amazing up to that point. But I'd be lying to say if that wasn't their justification to watch a bunch of advanced robots take down a giant T-Rex, then fuck it, I'm all for it. But while it was great that they were able to make a story and world so much more robust than its predecessor, what I think Guerrilla Games really achieved the most on was with Forbidden West releasing as buggy as Days Gone, yet they were still able to stay within Sony's good graces and not be put on the back burner to remake an older IP.